Hey, what's happening, guys? Dan Darrow here with another Options to Play video update. So it's going to be a busy week. I got a lot to cover, so I'm going to jump right into earnings on the radar. All right. Before the open Monday, really nothing of interest. After the close, a different story. GH, Garden Health, about 14 and a half points is what's priced in. Those are monthly options, though. Past few quarters have been blowouts. The stock has been relatively range bound for the last couple of months, though. Seems like a decent bullish setup. Monthly contracts, though, you're paying for a lot of extra time, and they're expensive, and expectations are high. So either in a void or maybe a speculative trade, but again, high expectations, high valuation, expensive contracts. Not the best combination there. Into it. So it's going to be a big software week. Monday after the close kind of gets things started. So 14 and a half points above priced in for this one too. This I will say is probably one of my least favorite setups of the software stocks next week. Big run. I mean, it is pulling back a tiny bit today, but it's still close to its 52-week high. It's had a history of pretty lackluster reactions to earnings, so probably just going to avoid, or maybe if anything, look for a swing after the numbers come out. Keysight Technologies. So 5G play, 8.5 points is what's expected. Those are monthly options, though. It's been hit pretty hard recently. You can see here. And these 5G names really aren't bouncing yet either. I think like over a longer term, probably names you want to focus on, but in the immediate term, with like earnings coming up, it's kind of hard to expect a lot because until the coronavirus headlines seem to die down a bit, these names just might not be in play. So, I mean, I think it's either a longer term strategy or just kind of like wait out, wait until after earnings because I'm just not sure it's going to be like the quarter that it really gets rewarded. But I am bullish biased on it. Palo Alto, so another big software name. 17 points. Definitely an interesting setup to me because it was smashed last quarter. It's come all the way back, and you can see it's kind of hanging out just underneath 250, which is a really big area of resistance. I feel like a big pent-up breakout, you're probably looking at least for a retest of that all-time high, but probably more. And then it moved 30 last quarter on the downside off of like a similar level. So at 17 points, it seems like the options leave a little bit of room either way. Shake Shack, pretty big price to move on this one. So 975 ish is what they're looking for. It had a big rally off its low this year, but it still has like a ton of room from the gap last quarter, which was bad. It's tough to be pretty bullish because last quarter was really disappointing, and options are pretty expensive too. So, um, I feel like it could definitely be a mover, but I mean the options are priced in 975, so they're very expensive. And I guess I just don't have the conviction with it that it's going to move over 10. I mean, I guess if it's something that you've traded in the past and you have conviction, that's a different story. But to lay out that type of money on this type of name, I guess I just don't see it. So I don't think I'm going to do anything with it. Tandem, another really big priced in move. So 1075 is what's priced in here. It's had a huge run ahead of earnings, huge. And we rode that for a swing, but now the stock is way too extended, I think, to really do anything for an earnings trade. Plus, the options are expensive, and I really don't see like a compelling trade idea right now on that. Before the open Tuesday, Home Depot, so a big retail report. 9 points is what's priced in. Stock just about at its all-time high, and it's coming off a disappointing quarter in November where it got hit pretty hard over a couple days. So, the chart, the stock at its high, expectations are high, coming off a quarter where it got hit pretty hard. It kind of gives me a little bit of caution. And you actually have Lowe's reported next week too, so you have like the two really similar names reported in the same week. And I think of the two, Lowe's is actually a better setup, so I might focus on that one instead. Also, another retail name Tuesday is Macy's. $1.35 is what they're looking for, but they already guided the holiday sales in January, so I guess I'm not really expecting it to be a huge event. Um, I typically like to play Kohl's for the Macy number, but again, after they already gave sales guidance, I really don't know what to expect, and I'm not sure it's going to be that big of a move. So Either calls for me or maybe nothing. Uh, After the bell Tuesday, Amarin. So it's actually going to be a really big week for like small mid cap bios. There's actually a lot that I'm not even going to talk about in this video, but um, Amarin's they're pricing in 2 points. We've traded this in the past, but the stock has really struggled. It's basically given back like this entire gap, and to me, after the J.P. Morgan conference, they already gave guidance. There's not a lot to really look forward to for this earnings report. The big thing that people are focused on is like a patent ruling that's coming up sometime probably later in March. So I think any trade that I would do with Amron would probably be more focused on that patent ruling versus like earnings this week. All right. Salesforce, so big software name too. Like I said, it's gonna be a big week for software stocks. 11 points is what they're expecting for Salesforce. We've traded this already this year, and I mean the stock just keeps grinding higher. I mean even after like the pullback today, I mean it's still well within like the year-to-date uptrend. I don't love the setup for earnings because the trade doesn't have like a great like the stock doesn't have a great history of being rewarded materially off of earnings. But I will say that I am bullish biased, and if it does get up into like the 200 area, it could really possibly take off. At the same time, it's probably going to be a focus for me regardless after earnings. If it can like hold on to this trend, like I'll probably keep an eye on it for like a swing trade opportunity. Smile Directs. So 2.5 is what they're looking for. It's already been a pretty busy 2020 for this stock. Just ripped and now it's pulled back off some headlines. So it seems very headline driven at the moment, and that could make this report interesting. I personally haven't had a whole lot of success trading this, so I might leave it alone. But that's really like the only reason why, because I do think that it could possibly see three or more points. So at 2.5, the options, the pricing doesn't seem too bad based on the setup. So if that's a name you trade pretty often, it's probably worth taking a look at. Um, all right, space. So Virgin Galactic, 12.5 points, give or take, is what the options are looking for. And I mean, this one's going to get a lot of attention, but I don't have the slightest clue what to expect. Because I mean, there's no revenues, there's no EPS, so there's really nothing to look at. I mean, it's basically just a complete speculative trade, right? And I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other. So I mean, it's literally the definition of speculative. At 12.5 points, like I don't have the strong enough conviction on it to do anything. So I'm probably not going to be doing anything with that. Again, before the open on Wednesday, a bunch of small cap bios. Like I said, really busy week for small and mid cap bios. Lows. So 7.5 points is what's priced in on Lowe's for Wednesday morning. Like it's in an uptrend like Home Depot, and it's at an all-time high like Home Depot. But what's interesting about Lowe's is that it's coming out of like kind of like a 2-month base, right? Kind of like a nice 2-month base above like 118, which was actually like kind of like the double top high. So it basically has like a tight base. It's not too far extended out of that base, and like a 10% measured move from that 118, 119 area would lead to like a target more in like the 130 area. So I still feel like there could be some more upside on that one. TJX. So 375 is what's priced in. Those are monthly options. I don't really like the action on this stock around earnings. It's very rarely a big mover. But what's interesting about this is that it normally sets up a pretty good move on Burlington as a sympathy trade. So we haven't had any off-price names report yet, so this will be the first, and probably will move the group. So I might actually look at Burlington for a sympathy trade, just because some degree of surprise there still, because there haven't been any sales numbers yet. Weibo. So actually, it's a fair amount of China tech names are going to be reported next week too. Just a not a good backdrop for these stocks at the moment with all the coronavirus headlines. But they're looking at 475 for Weibo, and it got smacked really hard in November. It did bounce, but now it's rolled over again, and it seems more of like a bearish setup to me because you can see how important this 40 level is, and if it loses 40, it seems like a really obvious move down into like the mid 30s. So it does seem more of like a bearish trade setup, in my opinion. After the bell on Wednesday, Triple D. So $1.75 is what's priced in, and I think it's kind of interesting. More, I mean, I haven't really traded these much in the past couple of years, but this quarter is kind of interesting. Definitely a lot stronger than Stratasys, and it has a little momentum finally this year. Still decent amount of short interest, and option pricing is not too bad. So I might look at like a volatility strategy because for as quick as it came up, could go down if the earnings disappoint, but still could have like quite a bit of room higher if it really seems like it's turning the corner. So it's actually one of the more interesting ones, or one of the more interesting quarters recently for Triple D. Booking. So this is the biggest expected point move for the week, about 124 points. Those spreads are pretty wide though. Expedia was decent, but Booking has more international exposure. You still have all of these travel disruptions, right, because of the coronavirus. So, I mean, it seems like Booking would probably have be more impacted by that than Expedia. Risk to reward still seems much more skewed to the downside, and it's actually coming off like a weaker report in November. So, I don't know. The stock, the options are kind of challenging on this, and the stock is kind of challenging. But it does seem like the risk reward is much more skewed to the downside. Box. So 2 points, what's priced in. Those are monthly options. Had a decent quarter in November and actually finished higher on the day of its earnings, which was actually that's a lot more unusual than you expect because it really had like a pretty bad history of closing red on earnings. So finally broke that. It hasn't broken its downtrend though, so it's going to need a pretty good quarter to break that downtrend and get through like this moving average area. But if it does, Dropbox just today had a pretty good number. Broke its like long-term downtrend, so maybe you see like a similar move with Box if their numbers are good. Elastic, so kind of like a speculative idea. 10.5 points is what's priced in. Those are monthly options. High growth software stock. It's been hit pretty hard. Last couple quarters, well, last quarter specifically was hit pretty hard. It's rebounded, but not all the way. And I mean, I feel like with the sector still pretty strong. If this can just like kind of deliver like a bounce back print, that maybe it could start to make a move back into like the 80s and start to play catch up with some of its peers, which are like at or near their 2019 highs. Etsy, 675 is what's expected. Holiday quarter for retailers, so obviously big print. So pretty hard in November, and to come back, actually close the gap. It has a history of large swings, so I don't have like a strong bias one way or the other. And like strangles and straddles have actually worked pretty well over the last like year and a half. So might just go with history and look at maybe like a low debit strangle for like a volatility strategy on this one. Nutanix, so another software name. 525 is what's priced in on this one. It seems like a pretty interesting technical setup. Uh, it's hung in well. It's trying to turn the corner, right? It's got room higher, but the option pricing seems kind of high to me. Last quarter was more mixed. It had a pretty good response to it, but the numbers were more mixed, and that type of print in particular hasn't really been rewarded this quarter. So I'm like really on the fence with this. I do think it could be interesting, but at the same time, like a mixed quarter may not lead to that big of a move. So it's probably gonna be a game time decision for me. Square. Um, so 8 points is what's priced in on Square. Very interesting for like a longer term perspective, less interesting from a short term perspective. That's the way I describe it. Because it finally cleared this 83 like 2 year resistance level, but it has a pretty bad history of responding to earnings. So it's like it tends to close red on the day it reports, but I feel like, if this can deliver and if it can hold above like 82, 81 area, then it really could set up like a nice like longer term swing, especially if it starts to gain momentum out of this breakout. So I'm more interested in like the longer term perspective and less so for like an actual earnings trade. Before the open Thursday, Best Buy. So 7 points is what's priced in. They haven't guided holiday sales yet, so it's going to be a volatile report. It had a big pop in November. Now the stock is at an all-time high and it's in a pretty tight base, which is nice. But there's going to be a lot of like mixed signals going into this because Target and Walmart had kind of like mixed things to say about the strength in electronics this quarter. Plus any disruptions out of China, right? So options they're not cheap, but with like a lot of question marks and the stock in kind of like a tight consolidation near its all-time high, maybe look at like a lower debit strangle just in case it does have like a pretty like crazy reaction to earnings. All right. After the close on Thursday, we have a bunch of software names. Actually, got a bunch of big names. So Autodesk is about 14 and a half points is what's priced in there. Similar Intuit, not my favorite setup of the software names. It's up a ton into earnings, and it has a more mixed history of responding to earnings. Actually, this was one I might actually even look at like a bearish trade because there have been some quarters when it's getting kind of hit pretty hard, faded the news. So I'm still undecided, but might actually think of like some sort of like bear trade on that one. Baidu, 9 points is what's priced in. They got a preliminary numbers a few weeks ago when they delayed earnings, so this one could possibly be more of like a non-event, especially because everything that's going on in China right now. It looks okay technically, but I think there's just too many questions. So to be honest, I'll probably be avoiding most of the China names this quarter. Baidu probably specifically next week. Beyond Meat, 18 points is what's priced in, and this is definitely a wild card, one of the biggest wild cards next week. So the options are very expensive, but the stock has also seen a huge surge in volatility in 2020. Recent quarters have been good from like a beat and raise perspective, but the stock doesn't always respond good to those numbers. So higher short interest, so squeeze definitely possible if the numbers are good and it clears its recent high. But to be honest, this could really see a pretty big swing either way, and it's definitely a wild card. Pure Storage. So 2.5 points is what's priced in on that. Um, it is about I'd say about like halfway between its low from last quarter and like the gap, right? It was hit for 4 points that quarter. Like 2 quarters prior to that, it was hit for about five. So there have been some quarters when it's had like 4 or 5 point moves, right? So the options at 2.5. It does seem to leave a little bit of room either way, especially because a lot of its peers are closer to like their 2019 highs. So I feel like this is one that maybe sets up well for like a volatility strategy. Trade Desk, huge price to move next week. So 43 points is what they're looking for. And I mean, like the stock looks solid. The earnings recently have been pretty solid, but they just have not been a bullish catalyst for the stock. I mean, I think it's closed lower like 3 out of the last 4 quarters. It's reported something like that. So, I mean, to me, it's very tough to lay out that type of money on a stock that doesn't have a pattern of rewarding options, right? So, I mean, I really do like trading the stock, but I just don't think like an earnings trade is going to be in the cards for me. But I'll definitely keep an eye on it after and maybe look for like a swing trade opportunity. BMW, 11 points is what's priced in on this. Definitely lagging software stocks pretty materially, actually. It tried to break through the 200-day just recently, failed. You can see that it failed in November, and then when it reported, it dropped pretty sharply. So, this is one that could turn into like a good longer term bullish idea, but it's really going to have to like it's really going to be set up around what it does this week on earnings. Options are on the high side at 11 points, and I feel like it's going to be more of like a long term perspective on this stock. Like I don't know if you're going to see a huge move. It doesn't typically have like huge moves around earnings, so I think like the 1 to 2 month time frame is more like what I would be looking at if I did a trade on that. Workday, another software stock. So 1375 is what's priced in. It was a software leader, and then like the wheels fell off in August and September, way off the bottom from October at that analyst day. It could potentially be a decent play if it can get through 200 because it kind of hits like an air pocket with like a lot of room to run, especially because like ServiceNow, like which is one of its peers, is at its 52-week high. So more speculative, definitely, but if they can really put together a good quarter and it gets through 200, this could be interesting on the upside. So that's kind of what I'm thinking with Workday. All right, and wrapping things up Friday morning, Foot Locker, 425 is what's priced in. It had a smaller than normal move last quarter, but it's the holiday season and the stock has been in like a really tight range for 3 months. So this one, historically, the straddles have worked pretty well. I'm thinking like if it's worked decently over the last 2 years, maybe go with that idea again. So some sort of like strangle, maybe like a lower debit strangle, or even like a straddle opportunity on that. And then Wayfair, so the last name, 11.5 is what's priced in. The stock broke down sharply recently, and it's actually hanging right at a critical long-term level of support. So last quarter it was hit. Stock is acting weak. It's basically set up like right above a key long-term level of support. It seems like it's designed better or set up better for like a bearish trade. This stock like always seems to have my number and do the opposite of whatever I expect. So I'm not sure that I'm necessarily going to trade it, but it does seem like it's like one of the more interesting bearish trade ideas for next week. Definitely. All right. So lots going on. You can see it's actually like a surprisingly busy week of earnings. So expect a lot of news on that front. Um, if you like these videos and you're looking for more information on option trade ideas, like specifically for some of these trade ideas, or if you're looking for more information on options education, please follow up with the link in the description of the video for more information on options to play. All right. Hope you guys all have a wonderful weekend, and I will talk to you on Monday.